Welcome, everybody. We have over 150 people RSVP'd for tonight. My name is John Crowley with Equus Community Foundation, and welcome to tonight's Candidates Forum on Climate and the Environment. Thank you all for attending, and thank you to all who spread the word about tonight's event. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We'll be recording this forum. In fact, it is recording right now. And we're going to be publishing that within a few days on our YouTube channel. Tonight we have Spanish interpretation available. Thank you to Maria Galvez and Monica Aparicio for providing the services tonight. Thank you very much to both of you. Over to you.
Okay. Buenas noches. Hola, me llamo María Galvez y estoy aquí con mi cointérprete, Mónica Aparicio. Estamos aquí como intérpretes. Hello, my name is Maria Galvez and I am here with my co-interpreter, Mónica Aparicio. We are here today as interpreters. Hoy este evento se llevará a cabo en español e inglés. Se usarán ambos idiomas activamente, así que usted podrá elegir un canal para participar en su idioma preferido después de que le hayamos explicado cómo funcionará la interpretación. Today, this event will be held in Spanish and English. Both languages will be actively used, so you can choose a channel to participate in your preferred language after we've explained how interpreting will work. Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Después que termine esta explicación, se activará la función de interpretación. Si usted está conectado con su computadora, usted verá un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Si usted está conectado con su tableta o teléfono, pulse en más y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas. A continuación, elija su canal de idioma. We'll be using the Zoom interpretation function. After I'm done with this explanation, the interpreting function will be activated. If you're joining from a computer, you will see a globe icon on the bottom of your screen. If you're joining from the tablet or phone, click on More, and you will see a menu that will include an option called Language Interpretation. To listen to interpreting, click the globe icon on Language Interpretation, then choose your language channel. Gracias. Can you?
Hey, well, again, welcome to the Petaluma Candidates Forum on Climate and Environment, and thanks to the Aquas Community Foundation for hosting this event. My name is Ben Gettleman, and I'm the moderator for tonight's event. I'm a Petaluma resident, and I work professionally as a facilitator and a mediator. Tonight's forum will be organized into two parts with a 10-minute break in between. First, I'll be asking questions of the mayoral candidates from 6 to about 6:50, and then I'll be asking questions of the city council candidates. All mayoral candidates will receive the same questions, and all city council candidates will receive the same questions. None of the questions have been shared with any of the candidates in advance. Unfortunately, there'll be no time for audience questions, and you'll find that you've been automatically muted to keep down the background noise. I want to acknowledge the forum organizers received over 150 RSVPs with many questions relating to climate and the environment. And obviously, we can't accommodate all 150 submitted questions. However, we've taken these into consideration and hope to cover the content as best as we can. So let's begin with the Mayoral Forum. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. I'll then ask questions that are focused on issues touched in the Petaluma Climate Emergency Framework. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the questions that follow. When your time is up, you'll have 5 seconds to finish your sentence, and then you'll be muted. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a closing question. I've randomly selected the order of speakers for the first question. For the following questions, each candidate will move up one position while the person who went first will go last for the next question, similar to a relay. For each question, I'll place the order of speakers and the question itself in the chat, and I'll also say it so the candidates and the members of our audience can follow. For the candidates, please stay muted until your turn to answer a question. Please also remember to speak slowly enough for the Spanish interpreters. Let's begin. For our first question, the order that we'll go in is Kevin McDonnell, then Susan Kirks, and then Delinda Fischer. So let me put that in the chat. Okay. And our first question of the night is, please take 90 seconds to introduce yourself, noting your motivation for running for Petaluma mayor and how addressing climate change and the environment fits into that motivation. So Kevin, you are up first.
Well, thanks so much. I'm Kevin McDonnell. I'm very glad to be here tonight. Very excited to be running for your next mayor. I think the key thing to remember is in Petaluma, we're leaders in climate, leaders in addressing homelessness, affordable housing, plus all our basic core services. And I will keep us leading in all these areas. For 37 years, I've lived in Petaluma. I participated in every way to help Petaluma be the town we're so proud to live in. My wife, Melissa, and I have raised our 4 children here. I've been in leadership and achieving at every level. I'm now honored to be endorsed by the Sonoma County Conservation Action, Sonoma County Democratic Party, and State Senator Mike McGuire. I've demonstrated my ability to cooperate and collaborate to achieve in the community. In May 2019, I voted to declare a climate emergency. September 2019, I voted to create the Climate Commission. In January 2021, I voted to adopt the Climate Emergency Framework. In August 2021, I voted to create the position of Climate Manager. It's a time of great challenge, an opportunity. Climate is an existential crisis. I'm excited to look forward to discussing these issues tonight. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Next up is Susan, and I'll repeat the question for you, Susan. Please take 90 seconds to introduce yourself, noting your motivation for running for Petaluma mayor and how addressing climate change and the environment fits into that motivation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to be here this evening with all of you, and I'm really looking forward to our City Council Candidates Forum after this one. It was a very interesting forum last evening for those of you who were present or watched the Candidates Forum. I have lived in Petaluma for over 22 years and have been involved in our environment almost from the moment that I moved here, especially related to a land use decision that would have placed a lot of luxury homes on a property that had very sensitive habitat, lots of wildlife, and lots of open space. I asked this evening, a little clarification about what climate and the environment meant for the forum, and I never received a response to that. So I guess what I'd like to share with you is, for me, it would have been more appropriate for us to name this forum Environment and the Climate, because our environment is where we live. Climate change, global warming are all part of our environment. And as you listen to me this evening, I believe you'll hear a little bit different responses based on that experience. I have over 20 years of experience with 2 conservation nonprofits and have worked regionally on several environmental issues and continue to. So thank you, and I look forward to tonight.
Thank you. Okay, finally, Delinda Fischer.
Thank you so much, Ben. I first of all want to thank everyone who put this forum together tonight. I know it was a lot of behind the scenes work, and I really appreciate all your volunteer efforts and really happy to be here tonight. The voters of Petaluma elected me to the City Council 4 years ago. Because of my experience as an urban planner, my desire to make a difference in my newly adopted city, and because of my extensive volunteer work for local nonprofits. During my tenure on the council, there has been a remarkable shift and some audacious goal setting, including becoming carbon neutral city by 2030 and ending homelessness by 2024. My focus on climate and my leadership have been instrumental in setting these goals, and I will continue to do this important work as your mayor. As a renter and strong proponent of climate readiness and equity, I champion for other causes, including an increase in the minimum wage, stronger tenant protections, and banning the development of new gas stations. And now every city in Sonoma County is following our lead. I am running for mayor to continue to serve the people of Petaluma in creating a safer, greener, more connected community. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to our next question. I'll put the order in the chat. It will be Susan, followed by Delinda, and then Kevin. Our second question is, in your view, what has Petaluma done well in preparing for current and future impacts of climate change, and how can it do better?
Well, I am pleased to say that I participated in all of the process that led to establishing the Climate Action Commission, and then every meeting of the Climate Action Commission, making every effort that I could to give input from my many years of environmental experience here in Sonoma County and our Bay Area. And I would say that two of the Climate Action Commissioners were very receptive to understanding that I and the organizations that I represent had quite a bit to contribute. Unfortunately, I would say that, it's an interesting thing here in Petaluma. There's a very insulated group involved with the climate action process. And so helping our residents in Petaluma, a city of over 61,000 people, become engaged and really appreciate what we need to do to address climate, it is a bit of a challenge. And I think as the mayor, I would bring a different perspective and an additional perspective to help connect our new districts and our residents to climate engagement and climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next up, Delinda.
Thank you, Ben. Great question. So I think what we've done really well is create a framework plan, which we're talking about this evening. And the fact that that framework plan is actually informing our general plan, because our general plan is what will lay out how this city will look in the next 20 years. And every piece and every decision that we will make is based on that general plan. So the fact that the framework is informing the general plan gives me great hope that we will actually meet our audacious goal of climate neutrality by 2030. I think what we can really, and we've also done really well with gas bans. So we're no longer digging the hole, right? New buildings can no longer have gas. We're no longer allowing gas stations to come in. But I think what we can really do better, and I'm really, which is why I'm so hopeful about our general plan, is that we can really do better with our transportation infrastructure. We have a lot of work to do there to provide the infrastructure people need to be able to not get around the city in their car, because that is most of our emissions personally, or either transportation or consumption. And I think the other thing we could do better is protecting our wetlands. I think the fact that we allow development in sensitive habitat areas needs to change, and it needs to change with this general plan. And so those are the things that I think we can do better. And I think we're just at the beginning of this, and it's going to be a long journey that's going to take all of us together to make it happen. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think that we have done some things really well, and there remain big challenges. The thing we've done really well is embracing that we need to deal with the climate emergency that we have. Especially, we've gotten our staff to focus on things, and they put together really important legislation that council can approve and we can change things on. We have council people who embrace this kind of change. I mean, I, for one, in one of my first actions as a new council person 4 years ago, was to create and host an EV clinic. And so I called the Climate Center, and I called Daily Acts. We put together that, and it just showed that we need to work together to address things. And that was just the start. Our general plan right now focuses all our housing to transportation-oriented development, which means downtown and taller. And everywhere we go, we point that out. But as we go into the future, it's really important that our active transportation plan, which is being brought through the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, that it really shows a pathway to getting out of our cars, because that is the single biggest contributor. We fix housing and housing policy, and we have to fix our transportation as well. Thank you.
Let's go on to our next question. So we'll have Delinda, then Kevin, then Susan. For our next question, the topic of climate change and how to address its impacts can be divisive. As a mayor, how will you engage all Petalumans in developing solutions?
You know, I think the community engagement piece of our framework plan is the most critical element of our plan, and how we actually get out community and educate our members and give them a reason to take action. So I think it's becoming much less divisive over time. I think we all recognize the need to actually take action and to have a plan, because we're seeing the effects of the changing weather patterns, and we see the fires, and we're experiencing the drought significantly. And so I think it's a matter of actually educating our community. And that's one of the reasons why I brought the Cool City Challenge to Petaluma and grabbed a hold of that when I heard about it, so that community members could take responsibility and actually take actions, meaningful ways, in order to do their part, because they were all asking, what can I do? And so this gives them a path to say, this is what you can do. I think it's up to the mayor and the city council to set the policies, but we need everybody in the community to be taking action and to be doing their part. And it's really our job, again, to create the policies that the community is asking for and that we need to meet our climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that we do need to get out in the public more, and we need to do it in an engaging way. Right now, for instance, on the active transportation efforts, there's a big push that all bicycling is unsafe and the paths are inadequate. And I think what we have to do is say, let's get 5% right now and show leadership of getting out there. And leadership is the important part. If we show that and get our 5% adoption, 5% mode shift this year, and those 5% bring more next year, we will achieve a 2030. But if we tell people that there's an impediment to them to even being the 5% leadership, then we have a problem. So what I'm saying is that all our climate action needs to be out of its silo. I particularly would like to see the Climate Commission lift up the voices of other commissions. And when planning takes action, support or ally with those. When the Pedestrian and Bicycle Committee proposes a bike boulevard, we should ally with them and see that those things happen quicker rather than stay focused on one element. All our climate has to be interrelated, intersectional, and engaged quickly. Thank you.
Yeah. Susan, I'll read the question to you again. The topic of climate change and how to address its impacts can be divisive. As mayor, how will you engage all Petalumans in developing solutions?
Well, Ben, thank you. This is actually one of the primary reasons that I entered the mayoral election effort, observing and participating in the process to date. At our Climate Action Commission meetings, actually most recently, I recall hearing someone say from the dais that, how will we engage the community more? How can we have people be more interested? And I'd like to reach out now and talk to those district candidates for the city council who are going to be speaking after us this evening, and make a commitment to each of you, whomever is elected, that as mayor, I will walk with you. I will reach out to members of your district, all three districts, and in addition to that, our existing districts. And I think we have to reach people where they are. We have to be less haughty about our constant congratulating ourselves about what we're doing. And we need to add more environmental elements so that people are really interested and connected. I just recently started a homegrown national park program, which is part of a national program by the naturalist Doug Ptolemy, to encourage native planting and understanding of habitat and species. This is something that's really missing from our climate action framework. And this is where my strength is, including an open space policy and green space. People can be touched in a way that they will want to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to our next question. Here's the order, starting with Kevin. Okay. So the next question is, in what ways do issues of equity and climate change overlap here in Petaluma? And how can we best address the needs for our frontline and disadvantaged residents related to climate impacts?
Well, So equity is a huge issue in the climate arena, and 90 seconds won't do it justice. I'm sure all three of us will have our separate contributions to say on this. But for me, a lot of it comes to housing. And in terms of equity, it's rental stock. And rental stock doesn't get improved at the rate that homeowner stock of housing does. And it doesn't have the resource behind it. So I would propose that with all this new IRA federal money coming in, we need to take steps to match or incentivize into rental stock. And it's a little tricky working in the private sector, but I think that's where we can do the most good on housing stock and on equity. There's an unlimited number of other ways we intersect on the equity question. Certainly the employment question and helping employment folks in a green economy. I know our labor unions who endorse me have programs exactly for this kind of thing. And so I think we need to engage with them and bring those programs into our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Susan?
Thank you, Ben. Well, equity is extremely important. It is certainly a priority and should be a priority for all of us. And equity and climate justice happens to be one of the pillars of the climate action framework that was adopted by the City Council. I think the Climate Action Commission has done good work on the equity component, but I would like to see more people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color participating on our committees and commissions and in the climate action process beyond the Equitable Climate Action Commission that was established, so that we listen to what needs of our community are. They range from the public safety, community safety needs, and in terms of climate change, of course, health and well-being are definite intersections, as we learned from the pandemic and the impacts of people having to live together, having to go to work as essential workers. That also includes our healthcare professionals. So I think that intersectional thinking is probably the best way that we can approach moving forward with equity. And also being sure that all of our residents have clean air, the fresh air, clean water, reduce the expenses for water and sewer, and have amenities in our neighborhoods, whether you're in multifamily housing or single family residences. Again, it's for opening.
Sorry, you're at time. Okay, let's go to Delinda.
Thank you very much, Ben. So when we were developing the framework plan, the climate framework plan, equity and climate justice did become one of the pillars. But as we're moving forward and creating the climate action plan, as we're in the work that we're doing now at the Climate Action Commission, we're seeing that equity actually runs through all of the elements of the climate action plan, whether we're talking about transportation or building or decarbonization, consumption, all the areas that we're now looking at, that equity actually in climate justice touches every single one of them. And so in all the work we do moving forward with this plan, we need to be looking at equity and putting it at the center of everything that we do, because it's those communities who can least afford to decarbonize their homes and do the other work that we're asking to be done to reach our audacious climate goals. And so to create these healthy communities that right now, the communities that are running right next to the freeway are really our most disadvantaged communities, because they are the ones that have the most polluting air to breathe and need these solutions the most. And so again, as was mentioned, the IRA funds that are coming down from the federal government for clean energy in these buildings will really work to solve those problems for those communities.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our next question. We'll start with Susan. Will you advocate for or against the Rainier connector? Why or why not? And how does your position take into account climate impacts and environmental resources?
I hope you don't mind my saying that the questions that are being asked tonight are interesting. They're so intellectually composed, and I don't want to take any more time to say anything about that, but I just wanted to observe that. I'd like to talk about traffic relief in my response, and that will include the proposed Rainier Crosstown Connector. I've made my position very clear on this, and that is that we do need traffic relief in Petaluma. I support the Corona Road overcrossing improvement. I support the Caulfield Bridge or connector as the two crosstown types of traffic relief. But I'd like to speak briefly, and I know to Rainier, but also if we're going to conserve those properties, I'd like to provide a pathway to the property owners of those properties to make conservation sales so that they receive some benefit from their property. One of the things we haven't been talking about that I will champion as your next mayor is a microtransit system. Again, you district council candidates, I will walk with you. I will help you be a representative for your district. I would like to see a microtransit fleet beginning with 12 hybrid or electric SUVs with free rides for our residents to and from certain points, funded by the city of Petaluma, Measure U and other funds, grant funds, giving jobs to our residents. And I think this is something.
Okay, Delinda, I'll repeat the question.
I've got it. Thank you.
Got it? Okay.
So it's actually an interesting, timely question because we had a crosstown connector workshop on Monday night at City Council, and we actually gave direction to staff to say, please move forward with the Caulfield Bridge so that we can connect the southern portion of our community. And we said, please do not move forward with Rainier in its current plan, if you will, whether it be 4 lanes or 2. And what I asked for was we looked at that under crossing for Rainier that we spent so much money on and see how we can actually connect that transportation for bicycles and pedestrians and other smaller vehicles to the Lynch Creek Trail and to the river. And one of the reasons that we said no to Rainier, the reason I said no to Rainier, is because of the incredibly sensitive upper river reach. It was never a plan that could be accomplished. And it really, in the sensitive environment there, it just didn't make any sense at all. So I was doing a Rainier dance today with the mayor and saying, aren't we glad that this is now kind of put behind us? And let's move forward with much more forward-thinking solutions to our transportation issues and our congestion problems. And really, we need, again, the infrastructure to be able to offer people to get out of their cars and alternatives to get to where they need to go.
Thank you. Kevin?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, when I was elected to council in 2018, I recorded videos at house parties on the east side explaining why Rainier was a bad idea. But even previous to that, when the factory outlets were built, and that goes back, if you remember, quite a ways, I was involved in being opposed to those. And in fact, I've been involved with parties who wanted to take these lands out of circulation for a long time. As president of the Youth Soccer League, it was proposed we join up with other allies to make these parklands. It isn't a good idea to put a ballpark in a floodplain either, but that's what we were being pitched for. So I've been involved with this for a long time. And at our council meeting the other night, yes, we absolutely said this is the wrong project, the wrong time. Originally, it had freeway interconnection, and it lost that. Its traffic benefit to anywhere else is non-impactful. Its impact on the environment is just too much. But I have been working with folks who are in the process of putting a purchase attempt together. And the Rainier donut hole in the freeway would be the singular east side entrance and the only accessible trailhead that could be made. Others would not have any sort of vehicle access, parking, anything like that. So it's ideal for that. And it doesn't show on the Friends of the River proposal for purchase now, but I'm pushing them to get that included in there. But yeah, no way, Rainier. Thanks.
Okay, so next up, we've got Delinda. Coming up first, I'll read the question. What would you do to address the challenge of meeting housing needs while slashing emissions and protecting environmental resources such as water and open space? Are these needs at odds, or can they be compatible or effectively balanced?
I think they absolutely can be compatible and need to be. I think with the state requirements for the housing that we need to build, that there's no question that we need to be building just around our transit centers, which include the smart station. And, you know, we got funding for the Corona station, so that one as well. And if we increase headways on our bus lines, then those become transit centers too. And so this is where we need to be building housing, and we need to be building housing that's more multifamily. And again, on parcels that are underdeveloped. So primarily on our commercial corridors, again, close to transit. And new buildings, new multifamily buildings are much more water efficient, right? Because they have all the latest fixtures and they don't have the landscaping that we have for single family homes. Most single family homeowners spend about 60% of their water usage on their landscapes. And so I absolutely think that building housing, again, infill housing, multifamily, near our transit centers, that people can be near services that they need and get to the other activities that they need by walking or other transit and not have to be reliant on car. And I think the other thing we need to do is what's called decoupling the parking, so that we have parking maximums, not parking minimums, so that a tenant is not actually paying for a parking space that they don't need or want.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you. This is exactly where I've spent my time on council. I realized I didn't have to be a champion for all things. I need to support those champions, but I have to look for areas where no one is championing it. And so I've invested my time in the homeless area and in the housing area. And for me, housing policy is everything. It's climate policy, it's education, it's health outcomes, and everything. And we haven't done it well to this point. Point in fact, 20,000 people leave Petaluma for jobs each day. 20,000 people drive into Petaluma these days. And with our rising rents and rising home prices, our workforce is being priced out of Petaluma. And yet the jobs will remain here and the commutes will remain here. This is a loud call for better housing policy. But we've done many good things on this. Monday night at council, the report for Rainier indicated how many houses would come online in this coming year. Now, in the past couple of years, it's only been 70 houses or so, very modest growth. But this year it's 300. And of those 300 units, 100 are affordable units. So that's 1/3 of this year's housing production is in affordable. That's doing pretty good. Also, in converting the Home Key project for homelessness that we had our groundbreaking on today, right? We're reusing existing housing and properties rather than build from scratch. I think that's a good way to make good housing policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Susan, I'll repeat the question. What would you do to address the challenge of meeting housing needs while slashing emissions and protecting environmental resources such as water and open space? Are these needs at odds, or can they be compatible or effectively balanced?
Thank you, Ben. Well, the needs have been at odds based on what we see and how Petaluma has developed. We have very little land left. We have, I would say, as an expert in our sensitive habitat areas, we have very little habitat left. We have to look for prioritizing and identifying open and green spaces. And in addition to that, wildlife corridors, which is a project that is my project for mapping in Sonoma County and Marin County, and will be a land use tool that we should use. Going back to my suggestion that this forum could have been entitled Environment and the Climate. So for housing, I support looking at existing areas that can be rezoned, mixed use, near neighborhoods, near amenities, creating amenities for those and affordable housing and middle income housing as well. I'm also in favor of rezoning for small properties where, for example, and this was an idea given to me at the farmer's market by a very smart resident yesterday, for small size single family homes that can be first purchase homes or maybe long-term homes for family members who would like to stay here and live here. So a mix of housing and really looking at both infill and where we can rezone. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay. Next question, we'll start with Kevin. Here's the question. Capturing and storing CO2 or carbon sequestration is one of the main topics in the city's climate emergency framework. What are the best ways to facilitate sequestration in Petaluma?
Well, there's quite a bit of that in the climate framework, and I think it all should be followed, but so much of it is larger plans, and I really like to focus on our reductions efforts here, the things we can do to get us away from this, and that tips towards so many other things we have. Like we mentioned that the state is requiring housing here, but it's not just the requiring housing, but they're putting in laws that allow for infill density, and that really reduces what the water use is on it and what the embedded carbon is on it. And so these are areas I'd like to keep us focused on, is doing good housing policy on these.
Thank you, Kevin. Susan?
Thank you, Ben. Well, in the climate action framework, sequestration is combined with mitigation, and I do agree with Kevin in that regard. We need to be discussing two things at once. And so Cool California, which is a Berkeley, UC Berkeley program, is very interesting. If you input our zip code 94952 and then 94954, different priorities come up. Both of them used to be infill housing, but both of them are now building electrification and addressing the existing building situation in terms of mitigation for decarbonization. For sequestration, of course, I'm hearing a lot about tree planting, and I do agree that selecting appropriate locations, planting trees that are great carbon sequesters is a good idea, but we also need to be very sensitive in how we approach every area of our city, because we are a grassland valley, and oftentimes planting trees in an area could make significant changes that negatively impact species that may be relying in that area for survival. So well, actually, I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Delinda?
So when we talk about carbon sequestration, it's really talking about taking the carbon that we've already emitted into the atmosphere and having plants and trees actually sequester it into the ground. And this is one of the reasons why I asked as a council member to have a Parks Master Plan be one of our goals 2 years ago. And that is still one of our primary goals, is to develop a Parks Master Plan so that we can look at all of our public parks and open spaces, which is something like over 400 acres of property in our city, and see where it is that we can actually do that work, and how do we reimagine our parks so that they become these places that are more wild and are actually doing the work that we need them to do. And I think partnering with Relief and planting trees that they're doing is a wonderful way to green our city and do that work that we need. And I think the other most important thing is protecting our wetlands and those areas that are doing the work of the sequestering carbon already in our waterways, and not allowing any more development to happen on existing wetlands. I think that's critical, not allowing wetlands trading, which we allow right now, and I'll fight for mayor, as your mayor, to have that in our general plan as we approve it, so that we are protecting the existing resources that are so vital to our ecological systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next question, we'll start with Susan. I put the question in the chat. Imagine Petaluma has just received a $100 million grant to address climate changes. What are the 2 or 3 most impactful things you would have the city do with this money? Susan?
Thank you, Ben. Just to briefly follow up on the last question, and I will answer this one. We have a city government that has allowed habitat destruction, complete neglect, and displacement of wildlife on protected properties in Petaluma. And so that's an important thing for our viewers this evening to understand. It's certainly another reason why I'm running for mayor of the city. I want to bring honesty, integrity, and real truth to the processes that we're discussing. I also helped bring the Ramsar Wetland of International Importance designation to Petaluma. And so, of course, I do agree that protecting our wetlands is a very important action. For the $100 million, our transportation system, first of all, traffic relief, Caulfield and Corona, implementing the microtransit system immediately and completing the connectivity for our bicycles, bicycle and pedestrian trails. Reconfiguring and making our streets safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. And that includes bicyclists who need to use their bicycles to go to work. And then I think housing, we would certainly want to use whatever we could to provide really decent housing that's affordable with open and green spaces, green roofs, community gardens nearby, to make living in Petaluma a really good experience and an affordable one. And that probably would take the entire 100 million.
Thank you, Susan. Belinda?
So how quickly can we get this funding? Because we really need it. So there's 3 things that we need to be doing really to address the climate crises that we have. And one is through transportation. The second is buildings. And the third is actually our consumption. So the money won't help our consumption issues, but for transportation and for buildings, we know that we need to get the gas infrastructure out of our buildings in order to get to climate neutrality. And so the funding, I think, would be used for that, particularly for those who cannot afford to get rid of their existing gas appliances and replace them with electric. And then most importantly, our transportation system. Again, it's 70% of an individual's emissions. And again, providing that infrastructure that we need to get around this community without a vehicle, and also providing free transit, which is something I would really like us to be able to do in the future, and make that transit much more based on what the person it's on demand, essentially. So if I know that I need to go from here and get over to 3 miles away for a doctor's appointment, that I'll just call our public transit system and say, hey, I need a ride, and basically do that. We do that now for paratransit. And so that's the future of, I think, our public transit system, and that's going to take some funding. And so please bring it on, $100 million, I'll take it.
Thank you. Okay, Kevin.
This probably is the best question. It's the wish list question. So how fun is that? Well, the first thing I do with that kind of money would be, I would fund the purchase of the Rainier wetlands properties and permanently take them out of private hands so that they could not ever be developed. And after that, I would also focus on the transportation sector. Right now, I ride SMART train to my job in Santa Rosa. It's 1 mile bike to get to SMART, 2 miles to get off of SMART, and $3 to get there. $3 is not much of a barrier. And I see a lot of kids going to Credo High and Sonoma State on the train. I'd like to make it free. And I'd like to make sure they continue to have enough adequate space for that last mile bicycle line. Then I would also go into the EV sector, where right now, if you own a single family home, A, it's privilege, and B, you have access to electricity. And if you're in an apartment, that's a lot less possible. So in my time on planning, I've really focused on getting EV charging into apartments. With this money, I do it to retrofit the existing system. And then as the third thing, I'd work with nonprofit housing developers to purchase up existing stock of houses that need such improvements. I'd work with Housing Land Trust of Sonoma County, who I've done a lot of work with in our city, and I work with them in other cities. And I would see that those houses got improved. I would add rebuilding together to that list of local nonprofits who can help us on this issue. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, quick time check. We've got about 4 minutes. I think we've got time for one more question. We'll start with Delinda. And the question is, let me type it in the chat. What do you consider your top climate or environmental credential? And what's a new idea that you've heard from another candidate today that you support and would like to have a role in making a reality?
You know, I think the leadership that I've shown regarding climate and really becoming your climate champion over the last 4 years on the city council, you know, I'm the one that actually brought the climate emergency ordinance to the council on the agenda, and also the banning of gas stations on the same night. That was no coincidence. Those are two things that I asked to be put on the agenda because I saw that we needed those, and the community was asking for them. So they created them and said, I want you to be our champion and get that work done. And so I'm the one that actually has created that environment on the council, that leadership in regard to climate, you know, asking for us not to buy any more gas-powered vehicles for our fleet. And I'm demanding it, you know, and I'm the one that always standing up there saying, what about our climate neutrality goal? How is this going to help us meet that? You know, I do it with every transportation project. I did it with Rainier on Monday night. And when I hear from other candidates tonight, I'm not sure about that question, but I know that, especially after this evening and the questions that you asked and the answers, that I want to continue as mayor to be your climate champion, because this is how we're going to meet our climate neutrality goal, because it is audacious and you need somebody with the political will to actually get the work done. Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you. I think my greatest credibility here is that since 2013, I've owned an EV and put almost all of my miles on that. And I've started becoming an expert in that area. In my day job, I work for other cities and I've helped them put in their EV chargers, the conversion of their police fleets, other professional experience in working on this. And so I have embraced this as a housing policy where we can reduce our climate impacts by having new housing that keeps our workers in town with much more efficient energy and water efforts. I think that my push at planning has really helped move us forward. Even before we had an all electric code, we were extracting that from any developer who wanted to come to town. And then lastly, I think what I've noticed from our efforts here together tonight is that climate needs everyone to be a champion. We can't have singular champions. We need to all step up, and that includes all of our allies, no matter where they are on the pathway. We need to bring them along. We need to get along. Thank you very much.
Susan?
Thank you, Ben. I suppose my a strength is my longstanding environmental work in Sonoma County, Petaluma, and in our Bay Area over time, developing multiple positive and productive relationships with other conservation colleagues and environmental organizations. And so several years before the city passed a climate emergency and formed the Climate Action Commission, I have been engaged in the climate issue on several different levels. I currently serve on the State Route or Highway 37 Environmental Technical Work Group to have an assurance of environmental protection when that highway or state route is reconstructed. I serve on the policy committee of Together Bay Area, the Bay Area Open Space Regional Coalition. I have a very deep knowledge about what open space policy is, protocols, how to seek funding, and we really need that in our city, and we've never had it. And then, of course, I lead 2 nonprofit conservation organizations that have been deeply involved in many environmental issues. And I also have the awareness of Petaluma geographically and where we are in relationship to our other environmental areas, our coastal area, Marin County, North County, and I would certainly seek assistance and guidance and funding from our state and federal representatives. Thank you.
Okay, well, that concludes our mayoral candidates segment of tonight's forum. And I want to thank our three candidates, Delinda, Kevin, and Susan, for participating tonight. We are going to take a 9-minute break, and we'll be resuming at 7 o'clock with our city council candidates. So thanks everyone for who's here. Please hang out and catch the next segment. And again, thank you to our mayoral candidates for participating tonight. Okay, we're at the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome back to this evening's Petaluma Candidates Forum on Climate and the Environment. My name is Ben Gettleman. I'm moderating this evening. I want to start with some introductions, just to kind of walk through the candidates who we have tonight, and thank you all in advance for participating. From District 1, we have Janice, Cader, Thompson. And also from District 1, we have Lloyd. Just want to make sure you're here. From District 2, we have David Adams. From District 2, we also have John Shribbs. And I do not see Bob Kosoff. So let's see if we can track him down. District 3, we have Karen Now. We have also from District 3, John Hanania. And also from District 3, we have Robert Conklin. So welcome to all of our candidates, and let's see if we can track Bob down.
I think Bob dropped out.
Okay. Thanks, John.
He was present for the forum on Monday, and I haven't seen him officially drop out.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Let me do my brief introductions, and I'll turn it over to you. Each candidate in the introductions, you'll have a minute to introduce yourselves. I'll then ask questions that are similar to the mayoral candidate forum that are focused on issues touched on in the Petaluma Climate Emergency Framework. For each question, you'll have 1 minute, just recognizing we've got a number of people here. When your time is up, you'll have about 5 seconds to finish your sentence, and then you'll be muted. So the order is randomly selected. I will place the order of speakers in the chat and the questions so everyone can follow. So with that in mind, let's see. I'm going to put the order in the chat, and I guess let me know if any of the candidates are not able to see the chat, but I'm putting the order in, so you'll see that we're starting with John Hanania. And I'll ask the question, and I'll also put it in the chat. So for John and the rest of the candidates, please take 1 minute to introduce yourself, noting your motivation for running for city council and how addressing climate change and environment fits into that motivation.
My name is John Hanania. I'm 59 years old. I moved to United States 44 years ago. I moved moved to Petaluma 32 years ago. I have been extremely active in the city. I have attended just about every single meeting for the last 32 years. I have served in some committees in Petaluma, and I was also involved with the youth in Petaluma. The climate action in Petaluma is really important, not just in Petaluma, all over. And we need something to fix that issue. What sets me apart from the rest, everybody keep talking about minority and diversity. Well, here I am. And I like to take care of a lot of issues in Petaluma, not just the climate. There's so many issues on the table, and those are all the things that we need to take care of. You want somebody with honesty and integrity and action, here I am.
Thank you, John. My apologies on the pronunciation. I'll get it right.
No, that's fine. You did good.
Okay. Lloyd.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by thanking you for organizing today's forum and to all those for your interest and participation in this race. My name is Dylan Lloyd, and I'm running to be your next District 1 representative on the Petaluma City Council. I'm an IT professional, husband, and father. I serve as the chair of Petaluma's Technology Advisory Committee, which gives me current and relevant experience to join the council and address the most pressing issues facing our community today. With 2 young sons, I think often about our future and about climate change, because it's a very important subject. And my interest in serving is simple. I want to make sure I can leave Petaluma better off than I found it. There's so many issues facing our city, many of which we'll discuss today, mainly focus on climate. And I'm eager to join the City Council and be a voice of reason to address these and other critical issues. Thank you for having us tonight. And, I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Dylan. Okay, Robert.
Wrong button. Hi, I'm Robert Conklin. I'm 44 years old. My family's lived here for 4 generations. I'm a father of 2, married to my lovely wife. Lived in District 3, 18 years now. Bought a house in 2004 when I was 26. Worked like a dog to keep the roof over my head, and now I have a little bit of free time to dabble in politics. I want to be the voice and representation for working families in Petaluma. I can bring a unique perspective of what's going on in the here and now. And I would like to, I have kids that ride bikes around the neighborhood, and it's, you know, I have a worrying wife that doesn't, you know, necessarily want them out there. And I, you know, when I was a kid, I could ride a bike out in Petaluma and not have to be worried about being smushed by a car. It's a little different these days. I would like to be able to have my kids to ride their bike all across town in a safe environment.
It's time, Rob.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Janice.
Thank you. I'm Janice Cader Thompson. I grew up in East Petaluma on a chicken farm. My family watched East Petaluma grow from a rural community into the family-oriented community it is today. My husband, Jerry, and I raised 3 daughters in what is now known as District 1. What I bring to the council is experience, knowledge, and tenacity. I understand the complexity of the issues facing Petaluma and the greater global community. This is why I have been endorsed by Mayor Teresa Barrett, council members Dennis Posake and Brian Barnacle, Petaluma City Schools Board of Trustees, Senator Mike McGuire, the Sierra Club, Sonoma County Conservation Action, and the Democratic Party. This election is critical. My campaign is about the future, not the past. To learn more about me, you can go to janice4council.com, or you can call me at 707-774-5912. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Karen now.
Good evening. I'm Karen Now, and as a former Petaluma City Council member, I understand the diverse needs of our community and will work to improve all Petaluma's quality of life. I'm committed to preserving our city's rich history while investing in much-needed community improvement projects. I resided in the same East Side District 3 home for the last 37 years, raising 3 children with my late husband. Today, my family roots in our community continues to deepen with my 6 grandchildren, all attending local Petaluma schools. I support maintaining growth controls while keeping an open mind on transit-oriented infill projects, emphasizing affordable housing, reducing homelessness, and advancing Petaluma's commitment to fighting climate change. I want to provide the fire and police departments with the resources they need for keeping us safe and minimizing water, sewer, and garbage rate increases.
Thank you, Karen. John Shribbs.
Okay, I believe in community as a core value. I love our city, our watershed, people. I want to build a safer, greener, healthier community for our children. I want to implement the vision that the general plan update, on which I am an appointed citizen advisor. It is a very green agenda. I have a PhD in horticulture, worked in international agriculture, and climate change was always a topic of future development. I taught physical, earth, and environmental science at Casa Grande High School for 16 years as my second career. I have 30 years of volunteerism And since I retired 6 years ago, I've spent at least 30 hours a week engaged in many government committees and nonprofits centered on local environmental issues. Got the general plan, groundwater, watershed, wetlands, river, trees, open space, cool cities, development, and I'm now also on the Environmental Literacy Committee for the Petaluma City Schools, and that to get environment in all classrooms. I'm endorsed by the Democratic Party, Sierra Club, Conservation Action, and Mayor Barrett.
Thank you. Okay, David Adams.
Good evening. I'm running for District 2 City Council for 3 reasons. I've lived here all my life, and some of these reasons, well, they've been on our agenda quite a long time, and we need to finish them. My district would like to see the Rainier Crosstown Connector finished. I'd want to save the fairgrounds for the continued use of the public and as open green space. I want to help our community stay within the urban growth boundaries and still work to provide for affordable housing. I was born and raised in Petaluma, and I've seen the evolution of our town from 30 to 60,000 citizens. When my great-grandparents came to the late 1800s and 1900s, I dare say it was even smaller. As a volunteer of the Salvation Army for the last 15 years, and now the chairman of the TSA Advisory Board for the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to work with COTS, Petaluma People Services, and aid with many sections of our community in need. I was fortunate to grow my business and open it here. And in our industry, we focus on green because our industry has been not so green in a long time. I own Quality Printing Services, and I want to give the next generations this opportunity as well.
Thank you, David. Okay, I'm going to type the order into the chat for the next question. Dylan, you're up first. The question is, in your view, what has Petaluma done well in preparing for current and future impacts of climate change? How can it do better?
I think it's done well on a few fronts, mainly on when new builds happen, new housing comes up. We make sure that obviously, and this is obviously state as well, but part of the city is make sure that the solar panels are put in. The new buildings are energy efficient, making sure that the housing we put up is energy efficient. I actually think we can do better at that. I actually believe that we should go back and incentivize current homeowners to put solar panels in. I actually think we should require batteries into the garages of every new home or every new apartment somewhere to basically store that solar energy into batteries to make sure that at night when we do, we can try to use less energy off the grid as possible. I think we can do better at more electric vehicle charging in apartments, in retail locations, in multiple locations across the city, making sure that when we do have the electric vehicle, when people who have electric vehicles, and those are going to be the future, we have more chargers.
Thank you, Dylan. Rob, you're up next.
The city's been doing a pretty well job with water conservation and declaring a climate emergency, setting up a climate commission, putting a moratorium on new gas stations, but we need full circle mitigation and plan for our future. So we've done pretty good. I think we can definitely do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Janice?
I think the city is going in the right direction. I'm a member of the General Plan Advisory Committee, and every element of that plan, climate change has been weaved in. I do believe that we need to have safe streets. We need to slow traffic down. We need to plant more trees in our parks. And I like the idea of a master plan. Petaluma is going in the right direction, but we just need to make sure we continue going in that direction. And that's why this election is so important. So we make sure that climate change is number one and that we do not slip backwards, because that would be devastating for our community, but for the planet also. Thank you.
Karen.
The current general plan, which my name is on because it was finalized during my term in office, It has policies in place to help with the greenhouse gas emissions, etc. The next general plan continue the policies to remove more pollution than we admit, while securing a resilient community, securing our resilient community in our future. As a teacher, I educate children and their parents all the time on zero waste, saving the world one day at a time by doing what we can to teach the next generation is what's going to make Petaluma even better. And we're doing a really good job. I'm really proud of it. My young son and his family just bought a house and put all solar and have electric cars. So I'm very proud of our next generation. I think we're in good hands.
Thank you, Karen. John?
Can you please repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry, John Shribbs, and I will repeat the question. There's two Johns. In your view, what has Petaluma done well in preparing for current and future impacts of climate change? How can it do better? So let's go with John Shribbs.
Thank you. Petaluma has changed quite a bit in its attitude and actions in these last 4 years. Because of the drought and the wildfires, we housed 10,000 people for a couple of weeks here, and we did a phenomenal job. The whole drought, we are saving water 30%. We're doing a great job as a community. And then there's other things that we're doing. Our bicycle community is expanding and growing. Electric bikes are out there now. You see quite a few of them. So we have Cool Block happening. I'm a Cool Block leader, and I'm seeing 200 other Cool Block leaders taking actions in their neighborhoods. We are leading the edge of the future. So we need to continue all that. So we have a plan. I'm on the general plan and also looking at various waters and how do we use waters. There's lots of things that we have done and are about to plan to do. The groundwater, we're going to be drilling down and putting water into the ground and then pulling it back out again as an extra resource. So the city has plans. Lots of good things are going on.
Thank you, John. David? You're on mute, David.
I think the city's been doing a good job of laying out the groundwork to start going forward. I do think that we need to help aid the residents of Petaluma to get on board with that. We're making too many declarations that you will not have gas truck or cars at a certain date, and you will do this. I'd like to see us have a better infrastructure for charging the vehicles so that people can get on board and know that if they go downtown, they could be charging their vehicle and make that transition easier. I'd like to see more stronger programs in helping people pull their lawns and help them afford to put down drought-resistant plants with ideas on how to do that. When we had a program like that some years ago that supplied manpower and a place to go buy better priced plants. Moving forward, there's a lot of details to this, but I think they're doing an adequate job.
Thank you, David. And finally, John Hanania.
There's always improvement or room for improvement. Petaluma have done a great job so far, but I think they need to do a lot more. One of them is building more green building. Petaluma have a municipal code, I believe in April 4th, 2022, and to have all the new appliances. How to get the word out to people to be involved and to meet the climate action target. But most of all, you need to make the streets safe in order for people to be able to bike or walk. Petaluma have the worst street in the Bay Area, and they are not safe. There's many people who have died in our road. So we need to fix the streets. We need also to make things available for people to move from gas to electric or battery operated. And so the Petaluma need to make some incentive. Thank you.
Okay. So I put the order in the chat. Rob, you are up first. The question is, in what ways do issues of equity and climate change overlap here in Petaluma? And how can we best address the needs of our frontline and disadvantaged residents related to climate impacts?
You know, the biggest fear with working class folks in Petaluma is I wouldn't call it an excuse, it's more of a fear. They say, you know, we can't buy an EV because we can't afford it. We can't, you know, put solar on. We don't have the funds. We're just hanging on for dear life. I want to see the best policies in place for climate change, but we can't leave people behind. It's the thing is we need to help provide the amenities for the people who can't necessarily afford it now, and, you know, do what we can so everybody can get on board, whether they can afford it now or not. Thank you.
Janice.
We definitely need to have more infill housing, and we need to have affordable housing because Petaluma is absolutely lacking affordable housing. There's definitely a shortage of workers, and people are having to drive from Fairfield to come into work here. We also need to provide, and I do believe that public transit should absolutely be free. If you really want to move people, I think that public transit is very important. I think we need to kind of shift in the type of public transit that we have today. I know we're going for electrification, but maybe smaller buses so they can move more people and accommodate people's needs. I feel as though when people are renting, we need to have incentives for landlords to convert from gas to electric to make it safer for people to live in their homes. We need a lot more recreation. Recreational areas are very important. Thank you.
Karen now.
Yes, like I mentioned before, education is very important to educate the whole population of Petaluma, not just the disadvantaged, but also their older folks who may have forgotten how to do the lifestyle changes of using less energy, like lowering the temperature in the winter and the summer, and using LED, energy efficient appliances, the cold water washing, or old-fashioned methods of drying clothes. I grew up on a farm in Petaluma, and we looked at our dinner plate every night and everything came from our farm. My parents taught us at an early age to grow what we needed to eat. And some residents are choosing plant-based foods. That's great, as long as they're not out of season and they're grown locally, because all that contributes to our climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. John Shribbs.
Okay, so we have areas of housing, transportation, and environment. In housing, we can have some tenant protections so we keep them in their house and not homeless. We can add in some rebates even for the landlords and say, landlords, please serve the folks that are renting and have the rebates for upgrading the appliances, electrification, move that forward. In the transportation, rideshare programs of various types. I've really researched micromobility, and I think that's the real future. We have ride sharing with paratransit providing riders, and also in our neighborhoods, in our apartment complexes, we could build EV stations, supply 4 or 5 small little electric cars, micro or small cars, replacing 10 to 20 regular gas cars, and almost do that in programs that may be coming for us. And then in environment, I'm into trees, so we can plant trees, and the heat islands are a critical factor. So let's get some trees in areas that have the heat islands and provide some better parks for the folks to go to.
Thank you. Next up is David Adams. Before we go to you, David, I'm going to request that folks speak a little bit more slowly so the translator can translate in real time. And I'll try to model that. David, over to you.
Well, equity in our race to be climate efficient. Well, there's a large portion of our residents who won't be able to afford to keep up with everyone in that process. So we'll have to look at what we can do as a city by electrifying our buses, having more of them, and having routes that coordinate with county and trains, county buses and trains, so that the process is one that they can enjoy and not have to wait a half hour or an hour in the cold to wait for the next bus. Buses that go deeper into the neighborhoods, that's going to be an expense that we're going to have to put our money into to help get us to the point we want to be. Bicycles are a great option, but they're not for everyone. I used to ride 10 to 15 miles a day in my youth. And now with a replaced hip and a knee and aging, I can't get on a bike. It would be suicide. But so we have to understand that bicycles and walking are great for a certain segment. We need to be able to move our aging segment of population. And as well as used cars are not going to be available for them to buy for some time.
Thank you, David. Next up is John Hanania. Oh, John, you're on mute.
There's few things that really need to be addressed. Housing is a major issue. Affordable housing is the big issue in Petaluma. Buses, okay? We have big buses that if you watch them, they're never half full, okay? You don't have enough people. So we need smaller buses, micro transit, okay, to take care of that. And you need to make sure that the streets are absolutely safe in order for people to be able to do whatever they want without being in a car. And I will also support the just cause to keep people in their place, because sometimes some landlord, they get very, very greedy. Also, I was talking about, let's see what else. And you need to make some incentive for the battery chargers. So, and that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And finally, Dylan.
Yeah, I think equity and climate overlap with a lot of things, right? And it goes back to what I was saying about solar panels and storing that energy locally. I think we need to make sure that our affordable housing, the current ones and future ones, have solar and generate most of their power from solar, store with battery packs in there, have reclaimed water, and whether that's piped into residential neighborhoods now with the reclaimed water with the purple pipe, or reclaimed water collection systems to collect, and make sure the city actually incentivizes and actually gives those public or those affordable housing those things, and gives people, the people who can't afford that, the capability of getting those things to get to this point. And then we can actually, do the electrification of appliances and things like that. I also think we need to replace our entire fleet with electric vehicles and the buses and the public transportation as well. And I think we can do things now with technology like creating an app for our buses that lots of cities have that tell people and families when the buses are going to get there, because I think people don't really know right now. And I think that would help as well.
Thank you, Dylan. Okay, I'll put the order for the next question in the chat. And the question is, and this is starting with Janice, what would you do to address the challenge of meeting housing needs while slashing emissions and protecting environmental resources such as water and open space? Are these needs at odds, or can they be compatible or effectively balanced?
I don't think the needs are at odds. We just need to do infill. We can't sprawl out. The urban growth boundary is up in 2025. It should be on the ballot in 2024. And development should be around transit systems. We need to keep our open space around our city. If you expand into the urban growth boundary, it costs money for police and fire services, water hookups, sewer hookups. So it's a lot cheaper to develop inside a community because you already have your roads and your infrastructure. And open space, I think we have a lot of great open space. The Corona Reach is what I call it. The river plan, we have Petaluma, basically, there's like a spoke of a wheel and everything leads to the river. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to build infill and make our community healthier and less expensive to develop and better for our resources.
Thanks, Janice. Karen?
We envision a future where everyone in Petaluma enjoys clean air, water, renewable and reliable energy, healthy food, and thriving nature, and more. Petaluma has the tools, and we know how to make this vision a reality. We need to act with urgency about the climate crisis demands. We need to think about urban growth boundaries and protecting them, and then looking at transit-based housing and infill projects and live-work housing, so that our next generation is not using those those fossil fuels to get to work or around town, but thinking about transit. We grew up with cars, so now we have to rethink how we move our way around town. But that's the future, and that's what we have to have our goal.
Thank you, Karen. John Shribbs.
Okay, for housing needs, I think there is a housing element that was just given to us in the general plan, and that draft is formed right now. But the city staff has worked very hard to find those places in town that can be developed and put in the affordable housing. And it's going to be higher, it's going to be denser. And they're trying to stay away from the environmentally sensitive areas and find these places. So away from the river. And there's several places in town where the buildings are getting older, and business, it could be repurposed into higher density housing. So, and they're closer to the downtown area. So there's some older places we can go to, infill, and saving water. And if you look at McKenna, at the new development that they just put in, smaller lots, native plants, water saving plants, and then they have a catchment for all the rain that comes down is going to be caught for the flooding, and a lower water use entirely throughout, and energy saving facilities throughout, and junior ADUs. So lots of, so that's like going to be the new type of housing.
Thank you. David Adams, I'm sorry.
We have to protect our urban growth boundaries, and to do that, we have to stay inside of them. There's a number of projects, housing projects in the last few years that took so long to be approved that they were no longer economically feasible, and developers walked away from them. I agree with multifamily housing in deeper, closer to transit. But as we get out away from transit, we need to have our neighborhoods as well. So there's a cycle of life to housing as we're going forward. But some developments that have come up recently were set in place for 100 houses, and they're knocked back to 25. There's developments that have 280 houses, and they're knocked back. Now, there might be good reasons to pull them back from what developers want initially, but I do think we have to allow more housing to be built than they're currently doing.
Thank you, David. John Hanania.
We do need housing, but we do need affordable housing. Take a good look at the theater district. The theater district was an old building, and it was all torn down, and we have mixed use. So if we do mixed use and infill, we can save our urban growth boundary. But we are not doing affordable housing, and we're not doing mixed use housing. There's a lot of luxury homes, and not everyone can afford luxury homes or market value homes. And so I can tell you many places in Petaluma that Petaluma perhaps could negotiate to purchase this old property, tear them down because they're so old, and build mixed use or multi-family use. And that's what we need to do. Stop luxury homes. We build way too many.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, I think, as I say, in all these places, I actually live in Brody Ranch, which is a newer development. I think there are some things we could have done better when we built this community. And I'm going to repeat my reclaimed water, piping reclaimed water, trying to force people not to put lawns in. We actually did a really good job. But the front yards here the front yards are actually maintained by the HOA, and they have to be drought tolerant plants, and they're all maintained by the HOA as well. So I think, making sure those things get put in place when you build housing, but it's also a combination of multifamily housing, single family housing that are smaller single family housing on much smaller lots. I don't have a very big backyard, I don't really have a yard at all back there, just a, little space for my kids to run around in. So I think doing smaller, planting places, but making people so they could still grow their food, like Karen was saying, and grow things, but using that reclaimed water, whether it's collecting with rain or buckets and doing that. So I think, and solar panels, and combining all that into, our housing element to actually make the housing that we build energy efficient and actually correct for the future.
Thank you, Dylan. Okay, finally, Rob Conklin.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me directly, are you for building in Petaluma? Well, just to get it off the table, that's really not something that's dictated by the city. It's handed down to us how many units we got to meet. So let's get that off the table. And we got three choices. We either go out, up, or in. I'm going to say infill. That's the key. While protecting the urban growth boundaries, if we go out, and if we go up, I mean, we can go a little bit, but how high do you want to go? We definitely need to put transit-based housing in. That's key. Move to electrified buses. We're going on about that. And we need to modernize our building code for high efficiency and water conservation. And we're going to achieve this through the general plan. Yeah, I think that's sufficient. And quadplexes and duplexes. There you go.
Thanks, Rob. Okay. Get the order in the chat. Janice, you're up first. I'll read this question. It's a long. Petaluma City Council has committed to citywide carbon neutrality by the year 2030, which is only 8 years away. Transportation is responsible for around 60% of our activity-based greenhouse gas emissions, and buildings are responsible for around 30%. What city actions will you champion to bring these numbers down to zero by 2030?
Well, for me, it goes back to safe streets. What I hear when I'm walking the neighborhood is that traffic is too fast and people don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods. We want to make it so it is really bike friendly. And by the way, I am older and I do ride a bike and I have 2 hips, new ones. All ages can actually get out of their cars and start riding, but we have to have a network, a system so people can actually move around safely in other modes of transportation besides cars. We really need to work at the transit and make it so it is more tailored. Instead of the bigger buses, make it tailored with smaller buses so you can actually be picked up and arrive at your destination and go home at the same time. I think there is, it's a possibility, but I see more and more people riding bikes, especially younger people, than I've ever seen in my life in this town. And it's just been in the last few years. And I think we're going in the right direction, but it's really about a network of transportation.
Thank you, Janice. Karen?
Yes, our general plan, we finalized while I was on the council, and we worked really hard and discussed the greenhouse gas emissions. We eliminated future drive-throughs because a lot of greenhouse gas emissions is in that traffic waiting as they get to the drive-up window. We also were encouraging lots of green building while I was on the council, and we were awarding those developers and contractors who were using the green materials. We want to encourage our community and our residents to get off what my son calls off the grid. My younger children, I mean, they're in their early 40s, but they're learning how to raise their family in a green environment. I think we forgot for many years on how to live in a green environment.
Fine, Karen. Thank you. John Shribbs.
For transportation, we can easily shift. I think there's a future that I've been researching that other countries are starting to do, and we can make into ride sharing and micro mobilities. Even for the old, there's 3- and 4-wheeled bicycles now that are fully handicapped aged, and you can even hire drivers to drive you around with 2 or 3 people within these vehicles. Ride shares with smaller cars that could be all throughout the apartments. We could also, I have lots of complaints about the traffic and the speeding that's going on. Folks going down Washington, coming down from the hills over here, or coming from Sonoma, or even on Acadia. I was hearing several complaints about there's not enough stops there. So the trick is EVs are most efficient at 20 to 30 miles an hour. Gas cars are way over that. So let's take all the speed down and then put with the EVs, make them much smaller, and that could happen pretty easily.
Thank you, John. David?
In the mornings and the afternoons, when the schools are going in and when the schools are coming out, that's when the cars are the worst in this town. If you want us to keep the traffic safe, keep it slower, and alleviate a lot of the traffic issues, then with an extensive electric bus system, we could get kids back on buses to go to school. And you will see the amount of cars come flying off the streets, and grateful parents. They'd probably even pay, as in some areas, to have the bus system brought back up to where they could get their kids to school. You'll stop gridlock in the morning and the afternoon and let the city do the business of business. This is a major, major part that I think gets little talk. We've had a great talk about it here tonight, but it's our infrastructure with our busing and our infrastructure to charge our cars that are probably going to make the biggest impact the fastest.
Thank you, David. John and Hanania?
We go back to safety. If you want people to be on pedestrian or out of their cars, the street need to be safe. A lot of people in Petaluma, they don't feel safe. There's endless people are getting hurt, and a lot of people have died from accident. Need to try to negotiate the price of electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are very, very expensive. And nobody's talking about the electric vehicle battery replacement, how expensive it is. And when it catches on fire, you cannot put it out, okay? And to reduce the emission, I think the city need to make some incentive to try a buyback system, buy the gardening tools, 2-stroke, which are very bad for the environment, replace them with the battery operated. But you need to give them some incentive because those items are not cheap. And most average people cannot afford to buy them.
Thank you, John. Dylan?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we need to do is I'm going to go back to replacing our public transportation system. It should all be electric. All the fleet in the city should be electric. All of the utilities that the landscapers use in the city should be electric. I'm talking about the city employees, not the landscapers, but there should be incentives to try to get other landscapers who can't afford it, doing that. I also think I agree with David that I think bringing back, school buses, being a parent, I would actually very appreciate that, and electrifying those and that makes a lot of sense, because seeing the cars line up even in neighborhood schools every morning, I drop my kids off every day, every morning, pick them up, and I see multiple cars going through that school constantly. So I think that would decrease the traffic significantly. I also think we need to be investing in the technology now, the fiber broadband with different wireless and wired to become a smart city, because the biggest thing that's going to change it is autonomous vehicles to actually make it so people can get into those autonomous vehicles as like an Uber, and those are going to get more cars off the road in the future.
Thank you. Finally, Rob?
Yeah, definitely expand public transit. Electrify it. It's I used to work for the city of San Francisco. They've been doing it for 100 years. Definitely cuts down on emissions. We do need to expand it. Maybe work with SMART. Get free ridership going. Get people in the groove of going on public transit. And once we're creatures of habit, once we start, we're going to go, hey, this is easy, especially if it's cost effective for working families. I'm also about jobs. I keep hearing about autonomous vehicles, and I kind of want a human being driving my children around and not a robot. So I'm just going to throw that one out there. We need to make the city truly bike friendly. Like I said, when I was a kid, I could ride across town and not get hit. I don't feel the same way about my kid riding across town. And we definitely need to expand the infrastructure for EV vehicles. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Okay, I'm mindful of the time. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. We're going to start with Karen. The next question is, will you advocate for or against the Rainier connector? Why or why not? And how does your position take into account climate impacts and environmental resources?
Well, I have been listening to the discussion about Rainier since about 1977 when I was in high school and I was attending city council members as a government class project. We have had this on the shelf when some city council are against it, and then we have a back out working on it when we have a city council that's for it. So I have been an advocate for Rainier only to reduce the amount of traffic from the east to the west side. I also know that we built our hospital, our junior college, in the location so that Rainier could get those people to those locations for education, and our safety officers can get across town. And I know that there is ways to work around the environmental issues. And also I support looking at Caulfield as another east-west connector.
Thanks, Karen. John Shribbs.
Okay, for the Rainier connector, the city council just Monday night did a review. The staff came up and ran numbers on about the 10 different connectors that we have, both the walking, biking, and driving connectors. So we have about 10 that goes across our river and roads east to west in various ways. And they looked at the numbers, the transport, the miles traveled, who's going where, why. And in that analysis, everything was pointing to the best option for us right now is to put money into Caulfield. Is the best option for giving us the most relief for the best traffic reduction in congestion here. The second one was improving Corona. We need to expand it, and that's us under the state. The city's already talking to the state to improve Corona because it's a state-owned bridge. So giving those 2 things, and Rainier, the roadway, the numbers just don't match the environment problems that it's going to have. It just isn't going to work. But what we can do, what I've promoted is let's build a bike and ped and micro mobility type trail systems that would crisscross over that entire section in there. And we would actually.
Okay, let's go to David.
I've heard the discussions between Caulfield that's come up recently as opposed to how long we've been looking at Rainier. Part of the reason they want to complete Caulfield is to get the development money from the houses that are going to go out into a tidal floodplain. If you haven't lived here all your life, you've never seen that underwater when you get a king tide and a heavy rain. What we have here is they want to get money on a development that has not built yet, okay, and to get the money later. Right now, we promised it built into it that the housing, the police, the hospital, much of the commercial and retail space on the east side was all built with Rainier in place. I'm not an opponent or proponent for building in that plain out there next to it. In fact, I kind of like the fact that somebody wants to buy the land and turn it into a park. But that Rainier overcrossing relieves Skillman, Washington, and McDowell and the traffic that happens there twice a day. You cannot, it's just, there's so much more to this conversation than this 1 minute.
Thanks, David. John Hanania. Hanania.
Okay, the crosstown connectors. Okay, I do agree with what John Shribbs said about the city council. And I was there at the meeting and I didn't see some people who participated, but I didn't see some of the people who are talking about they wanted Rainier, and I don't see them in most of the meetings, okay? Rainier is something part of the past. The money is not there. And some of the people who want Rainier, because they're after development, and I can assure you that's the whole intent. We have Caulfield that should be built, okay? Most of all, I'm for Corona because Corona it need to be improved and is the most dangerous place. And I value human life long before any other cross connector. People have died at Corona Crossing. And that's the one we need to be focusing on to save a human life, not to go after money from developers. And that's what there's 3 candidates who are doing exactly that. And I have no problem saying it. Thank you.
Dylan Lloyd?
Thank you. I am a proponent of Rainier. I'm a proponent for all 3, actually. I think we should fix Corona. Corona is unsafe. I think we need to fix that. It's one thing we need to prioritize. I think Caulfield should be built as well. And I think Rainier should be built. I think we can find the money for all 3. I think we still can do big things. And I think we should protect Rainier. We should buy it as a city and build the 2-lane road, build a way to get into that park for families and people who can't, I can't ride. My kids can't ride bikes. I couldn't get to that park if there wasn't a road there, right? They refuse to ride bikes, so there's not much I can do about that. But I think, making sure that we can actually get there. I think we should build a 2-lane road. I don't believe in developing any wetlands at all. I actually don't understand where this came from because most of my funding, if you've seen my forms, are from family and friends, and I've actually given myself significant loans to run my campaign. So I have not taken any of this money from developers that people are claiming. So thank you.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, well, I was born in 1978, and they've been talking about it before I was born. So where is it? We keep getting promised it, the great freeway to fix all of our traffic needs. In the back, the little part of my heart was like, man, we've been promised it. I really like to see it get done. But after that workshop on Monday, we're talking $100 million for what, a 2-lane road. That just seems it's a boondoggle at this point. Some people might not like me for saying it. I apologize, but I'm a realist. You got to make the money count. And when you got 400 units just being built on the other side of Hopper Street, I think Caulfield is our definitely main focus. And yes, people did die. I happen to know that person. Rest in peace, Jawser. That should have never happened.
Janice.
The fact is, the city does not have the money to pay for Rainier. And that's just a fact. If you want to pay for Rainier, you're going to do massive development in our floodplain. That is a fact. And so the Corona overcrossing can be done with state and federal funding. Caulfield can be paid for today with the money that the city has. We need to have some traffic relief. We need to do things that are achievable. Rainier has never been achievable. Its purpose in the general plan was to mitigate traffic for every project built in this city. And that was its purpose. It's fulfilled its purpose. Now it's time to move on so we can actually have real safe streets and straight and safe overcrossings. It's enough on Rainier. If it hasn't been done and it's been in the general plan since 1963, something's wrong.
Thanks, Janice. Okay, now for our final question, and I'll put the order starting with John Shribbs. What do you consider your top climate or environmental credential?
Okay. Locally, I am considered an environmental leader. I am president of Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. I'm on the chair of the Tree Advisory Committee. I'm part of Relief and helped write grants. I helped pull in a $200,000 grant for the city to do the urban forestry management plan. And I'm also on several other committees, groundwater, general plan, watershed. So I've put a huge amount of time learning about all the environmental issues, both locally and how it's all tied internationally and nationally and how it all works out. So I've also, as a teacher, I brought in a bunch of money from A+ monies for, I built a native plant nursery with a windmill. I got 2 charge stations at the school, again, through grant money. And I built a permaculture 1 acre in the center of campus there with rain catchment, with auditoriums that was all done by students and me pretty much on weekends for free to the school system. It has a garden, and I'm there now. I'll be going there on Friday and helping the students learn to grow plants.
Thank you, John. David?
So in developing my business, we've always had an eye on how we were going to keep things green. Our machines are ozone free. We use soy inks instead of oil-based inks. We totally recycle. We have charging units for our employees to come and charge their cars, and we have facilities for my employees that bike to work, which they've done for years. I've always had an eye on this because our industry in printing has always been somewhat of a dirty industry. It's oil-based. It's always been petroleum-based. Our paper is recycled, or it's by sustainable forestry. And so I do everything I can in my business to help with keeping the city clean.
Thank you, David. John, Hanania?
Well, I advocate and I work with the wetlands, and I advocate for planting the trees. Trees are very important. I also am trying to convert anything that I can into battery operated tool that I can use around here or at my work. I'm also contacting the city where my business is, trying to put charging stations in front of my shop so people who have electric vehicles can charge their vehicle while they come, whether for visit or service, because in my auto repair business, there is not much required for the electric vehicle. You don't change the oil, that's for darn sure. And so, but there's a little maintenance to be done on him. So I'm advocating and I'm asking for electric charging system in front of my shop. And that's what I've been doing to save the climate. And I'm also riding my bicycle quite some often.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, so the first thing I did before COVID even started is I actually took a pay cut to take a job that I worked from home. I used to commute to Sausalito every day. I felt that was ridiculous and driving a tremendous amount. So I actually stopped that and I actually looked for a job that was remote. Obviously, in my industry, I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And it was much easier for a lot of people than a lot of people can. But I think at least I can offset, some other people who have to drive to work and have to get there by doing that. I try to walk as much as possible. I try to walk with my kids as much as possible. We have always used electric yard tools, even when I had a yard before. I'm focused on, composting as much as we can in our house. We tried not to use plastics at all. We don't reuse, we don't buy bottled water. We don't buy plastics. We have reusable lunch boxes for the kids. We're very conscious about that in our house. So I think those are the main goals I've done in my personal life.
Thank you, Dylan. Rob?
Yeah, well, I love trees. I served on the Petaluma Tree Committee or Tree Advisory Committee, I believe is the term, for 2 years with John Shribbs. Our tree canopy needs to be expanded because a lot of energy conservation happens when you have a dense canopy. I'm also endorsed by the Sonoma County Conservation Action. I mean, there's something to be said about that. And I've also worked in the transit industry for San Francisco, the one who sets the precedence on EV, alternative fuels. And hey, they even taught me how to put those batteries out when they catch on fire. So, the fear mongering and, saying that it can't be done is, or the excuses are kind of, I'm going to say thumbs down to the naysayers on that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Janice?
Thank you. I'm just going to share a few things that I've done in the past. For the city of Petaluma, I secured $2 million for the property acquisition for the Ellis Creek recycling facility, and that added 8 miles of public trails. I was a founding member of the Petaluma Wetlands Park Alliance, now known as the Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. Lafferty Ranch, I saved the water rights from being privatized. So they are now in the state's hands. So that water can never be privatized, because the city actually had a Lawler Reservoir up there, and that's where the city got water from 1955 until it didn't. I've been a champion of the environment for a long time. I was endorsed by SCCA and the Sierra Club because they know that the environment is important to me. I've also worked on the Corona Reach, the river plan 30 years ago, before the river plan was even being thought of. And so I feel as though I've been a real champion with the environment in our community for many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And finally, Karen.
Well, since the 1970s, when I was a 4-H'er, my parents brought us out to the old adobe. And as an adult, through the 90s, I worked really hard to keep the Petaluma Adobe State Historic Park open and making sure that the creek was restored so the salmon could continue to run up the creek to lay their eggs. And I was very helpful in raising money for the Casa Grande fish hatchery. We also had a lot to do with the Petaluma River Festival, and the Old Adobe Fiesta had a lot to do with the restoration of the river downtown turning basin and cleaning up and making sure that there was a clean riverbed around the turning basin in our downtown area.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, we're right at the hour, and that does conclude our forum for this evening. I want to thank the candidates for participating. I want to thank our audience for listening tonight. As a reminder, the recording of this forum will be available on the AQUIS YouTube channel within a few days. So feel free to share that with members of the community. I do want to turn it over to John Crowley from the AQUIS to make some final closing remarks here.
I just wanted to thank you, Ben, for doing such a great job at hosting, and everybody who worked behind the scenes to make this possible. A special thanks to Monica Maria for the Spanish interpretation and translation. Huge thanks for the candidates. It's a big job, especially with respect to the environment that we're facing. And a big thank you to the audience for attending and showing civic engagement. Petaluma has got wonderful civic engagement. And thank you for being in attendance, and wish you all good night. And thank you for being here.